The sky over the city turned gold as the sun began to set behind the tall glass towers. In one of those towers stood the home of Adrien Cole, a man everyone in the business world knew. He was young, rich, and always calm. People said he never lost control, no matter how hard the day was. He owned one of the biggest companies in the city, yet what he owned most of all was silence. His home was large and full of beauty, but empty of life. Every step sounded loud against the marble floors. Every clock tick could be heard from a distance. Adrien lived this way because he liked things in order. Everything had a place, and every person had a task. It was easier that way, clean and simple. But inside him something was quiet, something he never looked at for long. It was easier to stay busy than to listen to the parts of his heart that asked for more than success. That morning, a new maid had joined the house staff. Her name was Lily Brooks. She came from a small town and had taken the job because she needed to support her younger brother who was still in school. She was shy, always speaking softly and never looking straight into anyone's eyes for too long. Her movements were light but careful. She wiped the dust from the shelves that looked like she was trying not to disturb the memories that may have lived there. When Adrien first saw her, she was arranging flowers in the entrance hall. She wore a simple uniform, and a small strand of brown hair had fallen out of her bun. He nodded at her politely. She looked startled, whispered a greeting, and quickly lowered her eyes again. Most people in his house greeted him with either too much fear or too much flattery. But she simply wished him a good day, in a voice that sounded like the faint hum of a tune. At first, Adrien gave no further thought to her presence. He had meetings, constant phone calls, and a mind more focused on numbers than faces. But as days passed, he began to notice her small ways. When she cleaned his study, she would take care to dust between the pages of his books without bending them. She arranged his desk with strange attention, as if the symmetry carried some secret meaning to her. When she polished the silver frames on his shelves, her eyes often lingered on the picture of his parents longer than on any other object. One afternoon, while he sat on the sofa reading reports, he saw her reflection in the large window. She entered the room quietly, thinking he was too busy to notice. She moved around the space like a soft breeze, avoiding the creak of the wooden floor, straightening the curtains, wiping off invisible dust from the edges of the piano. Her focus reminded him of the way a musician handles an instrument, both with control and with quiet respect. Adrien turned a page, but found himself reading the same line over and over. He wondered why this particular maid caught his attention. Maybe it was her stillness. Everyone in his world was loud. People tried to impress him, praise him, or ask him for something. But Lily seemed to want nothing but to do her job in peace. She was careful, yet there was warmth behind her silence. Later, as he walked down the corridor, he heard her humming. It was not a known tune, just a light sound she made while cleaning the staircase railing. It filled the house with a feeling that he could not name. The mansion always felt like a neatly built shell, but that sound made it seem as if a soul had stepped inside. That night, he found himself thinking about her again. It was not romantic longing, it was curiosity, a kind he used to feel long ago, before money and meetings filled every day. He looked at the framed city view from his window. Everything seemed too controlled. Maybe he missed something that no money could buy. The next morning, he caught sight of Lily again in the garden. She stood among blooming roses, her gloves smudged with soil as she trimmed the plants. Adrien paused in the doorway and watched her work. She moved slowly but surely, as if she understood the quiet truth that care made things grow better than speed ever could. Something stirred inside him. He wondered what she thought of him. Did she only see a distant boss, or did she see something else behind his calm mask? The thought refused to leave him. For the first time in years, Adrien Cole's perfect order felt like it was being touched by something small but powerful. As the city lights started to come alive below him that evening, he made a decision. He wanted to understand her silence, to know what went on in the gentle space behind her quiet smile. He felt a plan begin to take shape, one he would never have allowed himself before. He was going to test the truth of that silence, even if it meant stepping out of the walls he had built around his heart. The rain began early that morning, light at first, then steady and calm. The sound of it against the windows filled the large penthouse with a rhythm that softened everything inside. Adrien Cole sat in his study, his usual place of control and order. The desk was lined with files, his pen perfectly aligned with a notepad, and a cup of coffee still warm beside him. Yet he was not thinking about his work. His thoughts kept returning to Lily Brooks, the quiet maid who had somehow placed herself at the edge of his mind and refused to leave. He had spent the last few days watching her move from room to room, always quiet, always careful. She seemed to live in her own small world, unaware of how much peace she brought into his. He had started to notice how she would pause by the window when the light changed, or how she would rearrange flowers so that their colors seemed to talk to each other. It felt as if everything she touched came alive in some hidden way. That afternoon, while the rain kept falling, Adrien decided to test something. He told himself it was a simple question of curiosity. He wanted to know what moved beneath her quiet surface. Did she see him as just another employer, or was there something more in the way she spoke his name with that soft politeness? He knew the only way to find out was to see her when she thought he was not watching. The plan was simple. He would sit in his reading chair by the window with a book, and when she came in to clean, he would pretend to fall asleep. He felt foolish even considering it, yet a strange excitement pulled at him. It had been a long time since anything had made his pulse quicken. He chose a heavy book, one that looked serious enough to hide his true purpose. When Lily knocked gently at the door, he told her to come in. She stepped inside quietly as always, her eyes lowering for a moment in respect. "I will just tidy up, sir," she said in her soft voice. He gave a faint nod and turned a page, pretending to read, though the words were a blur. It did not take long before the sound of her light steps filled the room. She moved about, straightening the papers on the side table, dusting the shelves, checking the short curtains that stood near the balcony. After a while, Adrien leaned back and let his eyes close slowly. His breathing settled into a calm rhythm. He made sure it looked natural. From behind his lids, he could still sense the faint movement in the room. The sound of her light cleaning brush against the furniture made its quiet way through the silence. For a short time nothing happened, and he wondered if she had already left. Then he heard her stop near the window where he sat. He could almost feel her eyes on him. His mind became alert in a strange way, each moment stretching out. She did not move away. Instead, she sighed lightly, not in sadness, but in a thoughtful way. Her voice followed, low and careful. "He looks tired," she whispered, almost to herself. "Always working. He never smiles." Adrien froze inside. He had not expected her to speak. Her voice sounded different when it was not directed at anyone, soft and open, like when one speaks to the wind. Lily stood there for a moment longer. "He is kind, though," she said. "He always says thank you. Not many rich people do that. Sometimes he looks lonely. Maybe that is why this house feels so quiet." Her words landed deep inside him, strange and gentle. He kept still, afraid to break the moment. He could hear her moving again, the sound of her cleaning cloth placed down on the table. Then she stepped closer. A faint scent of flowers reached him. She must have come from the garden earlier. Her presence filled the space beside him. Then, in the smallest motion, she pulled the blanket from the armchair and gently spread it over his shoulder. Her hand brushed his sleeve for a moment, then quickly drew back. Adrien's chest tightened. A warmth passed through him so sudden that he almost forgot to keep still. He had never imagined being taken care of in such a quiet, honest way. There was no interest or pretense in her gesture, only simple care. When he thought she might leave, she did something unexpected. She began to hum. It was a soft sound, almost a whisper, a melody that seemed to fill the space between them with calm. The tune carried no words, yet it held meaning that spoke clearer than speech. For a long moment, time stood still. The rain outside, the rhythm of her song, and the beating of his heart blended into one sound. Adrien realized then that his simple act of curiosity had turned into something far more powerful. What he had planned as a test now felt like a confession written by fate. He had only pretended to sleep, but something deep inside him had just awakened. The next morning came with the smell of clean air after the rain. The sky was pale and calm. The world outside looked washed and new. Inside the tall glass building, Adrien Cole sat quietly at the breakfast table, staring at the steam rising from his coffee cup. The events of the day before were still clear in his mind. He could hear her voice again, the soft humming that had passed into his dreams and refused to leave. He had never planned to be caught by something so simple. It only meant to satisfy a small curiosity. Yet the look on her face, the sound of her voice, and the gentle way she had pulled the blanket over him had shaken something deep inside him. Lily Brooks walked into the dining room a few minutes later to set a vase of flowers on the table. She looked the same as always, calm and polite. She spoke little, her steps careful, her eyes calm. Adrien watched her from the corner of his vision. She did not seem to know that he had been awake during the whole scene. There was calm honesty in her face, and he caught himself wondering how she could act with such peace after something that had felt so personal to him. When she left the room, Adrien leaned back and took a deep breath. For years he had believed he understood the world. He controlled numbers and deals with steady confidence. But he could not control the strange pull inside his chest. He told himself he was only thinking too much. Still, every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the way her hand had brushed his sleeve. It was as if that simple touch had stayed there, marking him in some quiet language he did not understand. By midday, the mansion returned to its usual steady rhythm. The rest of the staff moved about, and the world carried on as if nothing had changed. But Adrien knew something had. His thoughts felt sharper and slower all at once. He found himself listening for her footsteps without meaning to. It was strange for him. He was used to being noticed by people who wanted something from him. He had built walls to keep them out. But this one quiet woman had walked in without trying and reached the very heart he had hidden away. That afternoon, Adrien was supposed to meet with business partners, but his mind was lost somewhere between the sound of raindrops and the faint echo of her song. He finished the meeting quickly and returned home earlier than expected. The house was calm. He found Lily in the hallway, polishing the rail at the staircase. She looked up in surprise when she saw him. "Good evening, sir." "You are home early," she said. Her voice was steady but polite. "I finished work sooner than I thought," he replied. His tone was even, though he felt far from calm inside. He wanted to thank her for what she had done yesterday, to tell her that he had heard her song and her words. Yet he could not find a way to say it. If he did, she might feel embarrassed or afraid. He did not want that. Instead, he struggled between silence and truth. "Lily," he finally said, "you have been working here for some weeks now. Are you comfortable in this place?" She blinked, unsure of the question. "Yes, sir. Everyone is kind. It is quiet here. Find it peaceful." He nodded. "Peaceful's good," he said softly. Then he turned and walked past her, though he felt an odd ache when he did. When he reached his study, he sat down in the same chair where he had pretended to sleep. The memory returned with force. He could almost hear her humming again, clear against the old ticking of the clock. The air in the study felt different now, as if holding a trace of her presence. He smiled but shook his head quickly, trying to bring his mind back to work. Evening came with silver light through the wide glass windows. Adrien stepped out onto the balcony and looked at the city spread beneath him. So many lights blinked below, yet his eyes saw none of them. He kept seeing the quiet maid who had changed the rhythm of his house. In another part of the mansion, Lily finished her tasks for the day. She looked out at the same city lights from the kitchen window. The rainwater still shone on the roof edges. She thought about the quiet man she worked for. He seemed strong and distant, but sometimes when he spoke, his eyes looked heavy, almost sad. She had felt sorry for him the day before when he dozed in the chair. Without thinking, she had wanted to make him comfortable, wanted to bring a little peace to his lonely face. Why she had not known he was awake. Both of them stood in silence in different rooms of the same building, both looking at the same city and thinking of each other. Adrien realized that he no longer wanted to test her. He wanted to understand her. He wanted to hear that voice again, not hidden behind walls of duty, but shared freely. That night, as he turned off the lights and the mansion went still, he made an unspoken promise to himself. He would not chase this feeling away. Lily had woken something in him that he did not want to lose. He could feel a thread stretching between them, fragile yet strong, tying his steady, guarded heart to her quiet and kind one. He did not yet know what would follow, but he knew nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The morning sun rose behind the tall buildings, sending lines of gold into the wide windows of the mansion. Adrien Cole stood near the glass wall of his study, drinking coffee in silence. His reflection looked back at him, calm and polished, but inside his chest there was nothing calm. Every day since he had heard Lily's quiet song, something inside him had been fighting for space. He kept telling himself he could hide it, that he could live as before. But the more he saw her, the more his careful world began to change shape. He had not yet spoken to her about what happened that rainy afternoon. Every time she came close, his words disappeared. He thought about her face when she had looked at him with simple concern, about the way she had adjusted the blanket with trembling fingers. It made him wonder how someone could show such care for another person without asking for anything in return. That thought kept him awake more than one night. Lily moved quietly through the mansion, unaware of the storm that had started inside her employer. She continued her work as normal. She had noticed that Adrien watched her more often now, though never in a way that frightened her. There was curiosity in his eyes, and something softer that she could not name. Each time their eyes met, she felt a heat rise in her face, and it made her heart beat faster. She tried to stay focused on her tasks, but his presence had begun to fill the air wherever she went. One afternoon, Adrien decided he could not keep silent any longer. He found her in the garden again, cutting dry leaves from the climbing vines near the stone wall. The light wind brushed her hair against her cheek, and for a moment he simply stood watching her work. Then he walked toward her. She turned at the sound of his shoes on the path. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, standing straight. "I wanted to talk to you," he said. His voice was even, but she could see the weight in his eyes. She nodded politely. "Is something wrong, sir?" He took a breath and looked at the row of flowers behind her instead of her face. "The day it rained, when you came into my study, you thought I was asleep," he said. His voice lowered slightly. "I heard you speaking." Lily froze. The color drained from her face. Her hands tightened around the small garden shears. "I am sorry," she whispered quickly. "I did not mean to say anything wrong. Please forgive me. I should not have spoken while working." Adrien shook his head. "You said nothing wrong," he said firmly. "You only spoke truth." She looked at him, unsure of what he meant. "Then why tell me this?" He took a single step closer. "Because you also did something else," he said. "Covered me with a blanket. You sang to me?" Her face turned red. She shook her head slightly. "I am sorry. I thought you were tired. I only wanted to help." "I was wrong to do that." "No," he said, his tone quiet but certain. "You gave me peace that day. I have not felt that in a very long time." Lily felt her breath catch. She had never heard the cold and distant man speak with such softness before. For a moment, the garden became silent, the birds pausing their songs as if to listen. "I did not mean to make you uncomfortable," she said finally. "You did not," he answered. "You reminded me that kindness still exists." For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The sunlight shifted across the garden path, touching both of them in gold. Lily lowered her eyes, not knowing what else to say. Then Adrien sighed and took a step back. "I only wanted you to know that I was not asleep," he said, "and that your voice has stayed with me since then." Lily watched him walk back toward the mansion. Her heart felt light and heavy at the same time. She had never thought her small act would matter to someone like him. But now, it seemed to have changed something between them. That evening, the air in the house felt different. There was calm in every corner, but beneath it ran a quiet current of warmth. When Lily passed by Adrien's study later, she found the door open and the light inside soft. He looked up from his papers and met her eyes. For the first time since she had started working there, he smiled. It was a faint smile, unsure and almost shy, but it was real. That smile stayed in her mind all night. She did not know what would happen next or what he truly felt, but she knew that the man behind that cold reputation was not made of stone. He was human, kind, and in some way just as alone as she was. Adrien in his room sat staring at the blanket folded neatly on the armchair. It was the same one she had placed over him that day. He ran his hand along its edge, remembering the small act that had brought him back to feeling alive. Neither of them slept soundly that night. Both felt something growing quietly between them, something that did not yet have a name, but had already begun to change their hearts. Their lives, once full of rules and distance, now carried the soft weight of connection. And in the silence of the mansion, that gentle bond began to breathe. The morning after their talk in the garden began with soft light spreading across the wide rooms of the mansion. Adrien Cole woke before the sun was fully up. The city below was quiet and far away, a blur of roofs and early traffic. He looked out at the horizon and thought of the maid who had changed the stillness of his life. For the first time in many years, he felt unsure of what to do next. The world he had built on control and reason was no longer enough. He wanted to know more of the heart he had seen behind Lily's silence. In the kitchen downstairs, Lily was already at work. She washed the silver trays and arranged the fruit on the long counter. Her movements were steady, but her thoughts were not. She replayed every word from the afternoon before. The way he had spoken, the way his eyes had softened when he said her voice had stayed with him, had left her trembling inside. She had told herself it meant nothing, that he was only being kind, yet her heart refused to believe that. When Adrien came down to breakfast, she was setting the table. Their eyes met as he entered the room. A mix of calm and warmth covered both their faces. "Good morning, sir," she said quietly. He nodded, his heart heavier than his voice. "Good morning, Lily." For a few minutes they spoke of simple things. She asked if he wanted tea or coffee. They asked if the staff had everything they needed for the week. The talk was polite, but something deeper sat between the words, waiting for a way to come out. When she left to fetch another cup, Adrien's gaze followed her. And for the first time in years, the thought of another person seemed more important than business meetings or success. Later that day, Adrien sat in his study, but the papers before him made no sense. The mind that once solved problems with ease now stumbled over every line. His heart kept pulling his thoughts toward the memory of her song. He rose from his chair and walked to the window. The sun was bright against the city, the same city that had once been his only love. Now its noise seemed far away compared to the quiet peace Lily had brought into his home. He made a simple choice then. He would no longer hide behind politeness. He would speak plainly, even if it risked everything. He found her in the hallway near the library, sorting books that the housekeeper had asked her to dust. She turned when she heard his voice. "Lily, may I speak with you for a moment?" She hesitated but nodded. "Yes, sir." He stepped closer, his hands resting calmly at his sides. "You have been honest with your work and with your words. I respect that. But I must tell you something honestly, too." Lily waited, unsure of what was coming. Her heart began to beat fast. "When I first met you, this house was only a place to stay," he said. "But because of you, it feels alive. You showed me care when I thought no one cared anymore. You spoke to me with honesty when everyone else spoke with fear or with flattery. You reminded me that life can be gentle." Her lips parted slightly and she looked down, afraid of what her face might show. "I do not know what will happen after this," he said slowly, "but I know that I cannot pretend anymore. I care about you, Lily. I care more than I should." For a long moment, there was silence. She looked up at him then. The air seemed to grow still between them. She could see that he meant every word. There was no charm, no demand, no pride, only truth. "Sir," she whispered, "you are kind to say this, but I am just a maid. People will talk. It could cause you trouble." "I have lived under people's talk for years," he said. "It never gave me peace." It did. Her eyes filled with a brightness that surprised her. She had never thought she would mean something to someone like him. She took a slow breath and said, "Then let us keep peace, not for the world but for ourselves." Adrien smiled. It was small but full of meaning. For the first time he felt free from the weight he had carried for so long. He reached out and gently took her hand. His touch was steady, respectful, but full of promise. That evening the mansion no longer felt empty. There was light in every room, a warmth that came not from the lamps, but from the quiet energy between two people who had found something rare. Adrien no longer walked through the hallways as a man of duty. He walked as a man who had learned to feel again. Lily finished her work and stepped into the garden before leaving for the night. The air was calm. Same vines she had trimmed now bloomed with new flowers. She smiled at them, knowing that growth came only after storms. Inside the house, Adrien watched from the balcony above. He did not call out. He only watched her walk down the path, her figure strong and graceful against the evening light. He knew then that what had begun in a moment of pretense had turned into a truth that would last. What connected them was not wealth or duty, but something simple and pure. In the days that followed, the mansion became a home. The air carried quiet laughter. The rooms held warmth. Adrien and Lily did not need many words. Every glance and smile spoke enough. Two people who had once lived in distance now shared a peace that neither gift nor money could ever buy. And in that calm, their hearts learned what it truly meant to belong.